just right. Let's talk about Red Rising. Red Rising is a book series written by this improbably handsome man that has taken the internet by storm for the past couple of years. It is extremely popular, and it's easy to see why. It's action-packed, it's adrenaline-paced story about rebellion and revolution that ultimately feels like it's trying to say something. But does it say it well? And should you read it? That's what we're going to talk about today. Be warned, there are spoilers in this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, you can skip to the end where there's going to be a sort of TLDR about my thoughts on the series as a whole. So Red Rising takes place hundreds of years into the future. Humanity has colonized the entire solar system under this single government force called, simply, the Society. And the Society is built on this sort of genetically enforced caste system where each group in the Society has its own role to play in the overall functioning and are genetically built in order to do so. So at the very top of that society, you have the Golds, who are the pinnacle of humanity. 7 feet tall, like Greek gods and goddesses. Literally, think of like a Greek statue, Greco-Roman statue, come to life. That is kind of what they are supposed to be like. Golds are the rulers, the governors. They control society completely. Everything is essentially built in a way for their benefit, though they may argue differently. From there, you kind of go down into different groups until you get towards the bottom where you have groups like the Obsidians and the Greys, and finally at the bottom, the Reds. Reds are the bottom of the pyramid. They are the bottom of society. They are effectively slaves. And this is where we find our main character, Darrow, who is a Red living in the mines of Mars. And these particular Reds have a unique experience amongst the Reds of the society in that they, living down there, do not know about the rest of humanity having gone to the solar system. They think they are pioneers for humanity who are there to collect helium-3 in order to allow humanity to terraform the planets of the solar system so that they can live there. This, however, we learn pretty quick is just a lie that the Society uses to keep the Reds down there in their place. Darrow discovers this after the brutal murder of his wife and his joining of a revolutionary group called the Sons of Ares, who then show him the reality of the world and give him a single mission. Become a Gold, infiltrate their society, foment a revolution from the top down. Now you may be wondering, how does one become a Gold if each group is genetically kind of forced into their category in society? And they quite literally are. Reds have red hair and red eyes and a sigil that is literally built into the bones of their hand, showing them as a Red. And this is a similar case for each group on the totem pole. They each have that built into their bones. They are structured and built in such a way as to be useful for their role in society, in the Society. This, along with many other things, including DNA markers, sort of put him in his place within the overall role of the world, and make it very hard for people, impossible for people to leave that function. This is where a particular group higher up in the chain comes in called Carvers. Carvers are predominantly violets who are able to alter or create organic life in such a way as to give it a certain role in society. In this way, humanity has actually brought to life many fictional creatures, griffins, dragons, all sorts of things on all sorts of planets. In the same way, they have created sort of the caste system as it exists, and it is through a Carver that the Sons of Ares turn Darrow into a Gold. It should be mentioned this Carver is a particularly skilled Carver. The first book makes a point of saying this is not something that is supposed to be possible to do. Either way, they do it. He is trained by another person from another caste called a Pink, who are essentially courtesans, is the polite word to use for this. And it is in this way that the Sons of Ares turn Darrow into what they need him to be. So now that he is properly functionally a Gold, what is Darrow's job? To go into the Institute. Yes, it is really called just the Institute, which is essentially a sort of high-class school for the elite Golds of society. And school is a term that here I use extremely loosely. It is functionally more a battle royale that goes on for a year. They are all dropped into an area on whatever planet they are, and they have with them proctors. Each house, because they are split into houses, have proctors, who then are kind of like the governors of the house, you might say, but that, again, doesn't really work to kind of get the whole idea across. But for functional purposes, we'll go with it, right? Anyways, each house is named after a particular Roman god. So you have Mars, Juno, Jupiter, Pluto, etc., etc. Darrow is placed into House Mars. How do they place you into House Mars? Or any of the houses? Vibes. Quite literally, they take a stab at what your personality is like after meeting you for one time and say, that's your house. And does it seem to work? Yes. It seems to function pretty well for each of the characters in question. Not here to question it too hard right now. So these kids then are brought to the Institute, where their very first thing on their very first night is to get locked naked in a room with another person and see which one of them comes out alive. Why do they do this? Essentially because Gold Society is extremely brutal, and they want to make a point of you knowing that. From there, they quickly learn the goal of the Institute. Each house is given a standard, and they have to protect that standard at all costs, and at the end of the year, whatever house is still standing wins. What does still standing mean in this case? Are they literally going to kill each other, all of them down there? No, they can enslave each other using their standards, which they can use to mark other individuals as being a slave for their particular house, and then they go along that way. Because, the Golds don't want to kill all the Golds. That would just defeat the entire purpose, right? But they do learn about how the society is supposed to work according to the Golds. And at the end of this, if you do well enough, you can ostensibly be marked as an iron gold, which is essentially being given a single scar on your face. You are now considered one of the elite of the elites in the society. You can have pretty much your pick of any position in the solar system. Those who are not marked as those, they can still get positions. They can still do plenty of work, but they are not going to be seen as quite the same extent as Golds who have the scar, who are iron. All of this is probably like the first quarter of the first book. We're not even to the halfway point. And there's a lot that goes on in the book, mostly fighting, which honestly is extremely well done. Pierce Brown is extremely good at writing action, and it is one of the best parts of any of the books. Probably the standout part of the books. In some ways, isn't necessarily saying a ton. While I do love these books, they have a lot of big gaping holes in them, which are things that we will come to later on here. But to backtrack a little bit here, one of the coolest things about this whole book is that as the Institute starts, they are given essentially no tools in which to do the job that they have in front of them. They have to win their proctor's approval in order to get better tools, or else steal them from the competing houses in the area of the Institute. And this creates this really cool dynamic because now you have the houses, again, named after the gods, and the different proctors who are only, no one down there knows who the different proctors are for privacy and security reasons for the proctors. So the proctors are then called by the names of each house. So the proctor for House Mars is called Mars. That, combined with the fact that they have access to the technology of the society, creates this really fun thing where they are essentially like gods. And it's kind of like seeing them go through this whole thing with actual gods who are able to bestow gifts. It's actually kind of fun and kind of cool. Puts a really fun spin on the whole Hunger Games, Harry Potter sort of dynamic that the story has going on so far. Alright, we've described the Institute pretty effectively here, but what about Darrow's actual journey? So like I said earlier, Darrow starts out as a Red. Specifically though, he starts out as a Helldiver, which is a person who operates the giant claw drills that they use to mine the helium-3 on Mars. The Reds who drive claw drills, who are these Helldivers, are known for being incredibly brave as well as incredibly dexterous because they need to be able to move very fast and very efficiently in order to drive the drills. And Darrow, we learn very quickly, is one of the best at doing this, one of the most skilled, one of the most dexterous, and one of the most brave, bordering on reckless. In fact, that is kind of a driving character trait of Darrow, not only through this first book, but of the next two after it. Darrow also has a wife named Ao, who we meet briefly. She is shorter than Darrow, who himself is not very tall, maybe like 5 feet. Darrow, at this point in the story, would be very willing to go on living life in the mines. He doesn't think it's great, but he doesn't think it's completely terrible either. And as far as he knows, it's all they have. Ao, meanwhile, wants more. She recognizes that there is injustice in the way that they are treated by those above them, and she wants that to change. At least that's kind of what's intimated to us at this point in the story. The whole thing is told first-person POV. One night, Ao drags him out to break into this patch of greenery that is more or less controlled by the Greys, who are kind of like the wardens for the Reds down here, to enjoy the greenery, the trees, something they have never really seen before, and get to look up at the night sky, something which Darrow specifically has never seen. They enjoy their time there together and spend the night, and then when they leave in the morning, they are confronted by some Greys. And ultimately, she ends up getting killed for this crime. How is she killed? A particularly traumatic way that the Golds use to keep the Reds in line. She is hanged. But because the gravity on Mars is so low, someone has to pull her feet. That someone being her husband, Darrow. Just before this happens, though, she sings out this song that is supposed to be a song of rebellion. It is a song that is forbidden by the Reds from previous times. And this kind of captures the attention of everyone there, as well as the Greys and the Golds and the Arch-Governor of Mars, Nero, who has come down to watch. That night, as her body is left hanging there, Darrow again sneaks out to do something that is, again, supposed to be illegal, and takes her body down and buries it. Darrow himself is found out, beaten bloody, and thrown into a mine, where he is then rescued by the Sons of Ares, who patch him up and bring him to the surface of Mars for the first time to show him that his whole life up to this point has been a lie, that humanity has colonized not just Mars, but the whole solar system, and that his entire existence is a fabrication to keep them enslaved underneath Mars. This brings us to the point of the carving that we were talking about before. Darrow goes through the carving, he learns how to be a Gold, and then is sent off to the Institute, where he meets several Golds on the transit over there, and quickly learns, oh, this might be harder than I thought, because turns out he actually likes some of them. In particular, Cassius and a little freaky weirdo named Severo. The next 2 books after this follow a similar-ish formula, although they jump away from the sort of Harry Potter Hunger Games setting and get into more general space opera-y territory and expand the world of the setting vastly. But those 2 will kind of leave alone. I've already given you plenty of spoilers for book 1, so I will try to avoid spoiling books 2 and 3 from here on out. And let's really dive in then to what works and what doesn't in this first book and in the series as a whole. First and foremost, the action of the series is phenomenal. Bar none, some of the best that I have read. It is visceral, brutal, and gory, and does not shy away from really anything. And at the same time, well choreographed, so that you really feel as though you are in the action with Darrow, and you can see his movements fluidly. For me, that was a pretty big thing, because sometimes when I'm reading, I struggle to see stuff like that, but with this particular series, I definitely did. As tense and visceral as the action is, the story is also very fast-paced, which honestly for me is sort of a positive and a negative. The story moves at a fast clip, which helps you read it and helps you get through it. But there are many moments across all 3 books where it almost starts to feel rushed, to the point where it's hard to tell if it's a feature of the story or a bug. By which I mean, Darrow himself is such a rushing character. He's trying to rush through so much in this story to get to his end goal that it feels almost as though the speed and pacing of the story is a reflection of Darrow himself. But there are certainly a lot of moments that I wish could have had more room to breathe, and by the time you get to the 3rd book, you do admittedly get some of that, which helps the story as a whole kind of round out more. Meanwhile, the characters in the story are detailed and flawed individuals who all come to life in their own vivid ways. While Darrow is our main character, our central POV, our only POV, we do get to see a good glimpse of the other characters through him, colored though it may be from the first-person perspective. And so, as a result, we get to see Cassius, who, while cocky, is also very sensitive to those he cares about, and about his own role in doing justice for his family, but also for himself and the society he lives in. We see characters like Roke, who have this high-minded ideal of what the society is supposed to be, but who, in their own ways, fail to live up to that. And then we have Darrow himself, who struggles constantly with the job that he has to do, as a red pretending to be a gold and in bringing down the society, but also living amongst the golds and realizing that they are more than just monsters, that they are people in their own right and complex characters themselves. And to round all this out, the world that Pierce Brown builds is crazy good. One of my favorite things about reading fantasy and sci-fi is being able to sink into a completely different world and see all these endless possibilities. And Red Rising does such a phenomenal job at that. It has given me the sort of feeling that I've only really encountered with a handful of books before. I'm going to really miss being in this world. So then, what doesn't work? Well, we've already talked about the rushed pacing, and that is really something that bugged me on my read-through. It's, like I said before, it is really hard to tell if it's a bug of the writing or a feature of the writing. But the story, and in many places, feels extremely rushed. You go skipping through all these events, jumping through without a lot of time to breathe, without a lot of time to feel the emotion. Characters die, and it feels like it's supposed to be a really big and impactful moment, but you don't really get to feel the impact. It happens, and then you're moving on. There's only a couple of them where the weight of it actually hits you. Otherwise, the story just keeps churning. To follow that up is very formulaic. By the time you're halfway through the second book, even by the end of the first book, you can sort of see what is going to happen based off of what is currently happening, if that makes sense. You know what the next beat is going to be because of how high or low things are right now in the story, which doesn't necessarily add to the tension of the book. It does in its own kind of way because you see what's coming and you get tense over knowing what's coming. There's a term for that I do not remember right now. Dramatic irony. That's the term. So while the story does add that layer of dramatic irony into it, it doesn't necessarily feel, again, intentionally done. The story just kind of goes in this way and you can kind of see and feel what's coming. Sometimes it works to build the tension, sometimes it sucks it all out. And finally, despite the characters in their own ways being particularly deep, the story on the whole doesn't quite hit the same mark. It very much feels like it's trying to say something, but whether or not it hits that mark and does it well is hard to say. Like, it's just kind of tiptoeing. It's got the idea but hasn't figured it out yet. And that in many ways is an experience I've had through most of the books. As the series goes on into the next saga, after these first three, it does get deeper and richer, and that's something we'll talk about later on in a different video. Despite all of those flaws, this series is gripping. It is lively and it is vibrant, and it is one that I deeply love. And I think that everybody should at least give a try, whether you rent it or buy it. Whether you borrow it from the library or you buy it yourself, you should at least give it a try and see if it's something that you might be into if you are into sci-fi and fantasy. And those are pretty much my thoughts. A flawed but engaging and fun sci-fi read that gets better as you go along. I always do a really bad job at wrapping these videos up, so I don't really know what else to say here. If you've read Red Rising, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts, your theories. What do you think is going to happen next? What did you think about the story? If you haven't read it, do you think that you'll give it a chance now? Are there any books like this one that you know of that maybe I don't? My camera is about to die, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.